The current system of sick care, whether in the US or in the UK, does not give doctors the opportunity to get curious. What is the end game for this business? What are you going to do? When will you be content to walk away from it? And I said, I don't know. Maybe when I can sell it for $1 million. And he said, oh, is that what a baby is worth to you? Half Italian-American, half South Korean girl who already had 3 children, who was willing to donate her eggs to me. And she said, I wouldn't do that round of IVF if I were you. Even if you're successful, you've only got a good 5 years left. It takes all the worn out components and recycles them and turns them into a new cell, but it also takes the mitochondria, like the car battery in your cell. It gets rid of the old one and it puts a new one in its place. Crazy, because it showed that older mice had the capacity to outperform younger mice. I am sure it's going to be horrible, but go ahead. Here, take my blood. And the result comes back and it shocks me. So it says 21.
Hi, I'm Cary and welcome to the Eat Nourish Love podcast. For over 20 years, I've created events, raised over 4 million for good causes, and been lucky enough to meet some incredible people along the way. This podcast is about exploring stories and insights that really shape us, with inspiring guests from wellness, business, self-care and personal growth. It's about learning to trust our intuition and discovering what truly matters, and how, with hard work, belief and tenacity, we can make so many things happen.
So welcome to the podcast this morning. I'm very excited to have our guests here. Welcome, Leslie, to the podcast.
I'm very excited to be here, Caroline. We've had a chance to chat, and I know that you and I have we've both been living this wellness way for decades. It's not something new that we've jumped on the bandwagon of, but something that we've been doing for the last 20 years.
Absolutely. So Leslie Kenny, you were a former international banker in Switzerland and Walt Disney executive who became an entrepreneur after launching the first online matchmaking companies across China and Southeast Asia, which we're going to have to come on to. But this is the key thing. In your late 30s, you were diagnosed with lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and was told there was no cure. So refusing to accept that, you transformed your health through nutrition, lifestyle changes, and deep interest in cellular health and longevity. And you later conceived naturally at the age of 43, which you were told that wouldn't happen, which is incredible. Inspired by your own journey, you went on to collaborate with leading scientists, including researchers affiliated to the University of Oxford, to better understand the biology of aging. You founded Oxford Healthspan with a mission to make science-led, food-derived longevity solutions accessible to everyone who believes growing older doesn't have to mean declining health. Today, you're passionate about supporting innovation, empowering entrepreneurs, and helping people live longer, healthier lives through evidence-based approaches to healthy aging. Wow, how incredible. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Likewise, I can say exactly the same about you.
So Leslie, where did it all begin? So let's just start a little bit about this Swiss banking and the matchmaking.
Wow. So I got to Switzerland after finishing my degree at UC Berkeley in Northern California, and wanted to stay in Switzerland because I felt that people really had, they really did what they said. So if they said the environment was important, they were all recycling. People in Northern California or at Berkeley all said, oh, the environment's important, but they never did anything about it.
Yeah.
And everything in Switzerland was so different to how it was in Berkeley. And Berkeley is meant to be a forward-thinking kind of city, that I decided I had to stay in Switzerland. I was enrolled at the University of Zurich at the time. And if you want to get a job in Switzerland, you really only have 3 choices. It's pharmaceuticals, insurance, or banking. And I thought, well, they all sound terribly boring and not me at all. But The least boring sounds like banking. The other two seem like they need specialist knowledge. So I'll try this. And it was really, there was no sort of intentionality. It was really, how do I stay in Switzerland? And that's how I got started there. I found it, in the end, quite boring and frankly impossible for women to move up the ladder professionally. It's just one of those countries that it didn't go through the Second World War, which was a time when a lot of women got the opportunity to get professional roles of responsibility, whether it was in Britain, the United States, or in Germany. That didn't happen in Switzerland. And so a lot of women, their careers would end around age 30 as they started to start families. And I realized that if I wanted to have a career, I would have to get out of that. And so I um, decided to reinvent myself and get an MBA at Harvard. And when I left, I wanted to do something that held meaning for me, and that was um, the moving image, because I felt the moving image had the power to influence us positively if we could harness it in, in a positive way for society. And I went to work for the Walt Disney Company with a lot of idealism. And at Disney, they put me in charge of the part of the business that wasn't making any money at all, called the internet. And my line manager apologized to me for putting me in charge of the internet because there was no money in it. And
No.
I, set about learning everything I could and realized, boy, this is going to be big. This is going to change how we communicate with each other. But rather than just selling books or paper or um, existing goods, consumer goods over the internet, what are the new things that this technology is going to enable us to do?
Is that what
And
you
I
thought?
realized
Is that what you
that's
asked
what
that
I thought.
question?
That was the question I asked, was
Yeah.
what haven't we thought of? What new kind of product or social phenomenon are we going to witness because of this technology? And I realized very quickly that it was perfect for online matchmaking, because people were creating user-generated content. That was their profiles and their photos. And the database would be able to match them with thousands of people from all over Asia, whom they might never get the chance to meet because their own social circle in their community was very small. So um, I started with this online matchmaking company, and we were certainly the first or the second into China. And I had to work with the Chinese government to allow that to happen. The Chinese internet is closed. There are only 4 entry points in, and the government controls them to this day very carefully.
Can you just explain
So
what do you mean by that? What do you mean that there are only 4? What do you mean by that?
probably where the cable lines go into China, so from the rest of the world. So the Chinese government controls the internet into China, and they do spend a lot of money censoring it. And if they see things they don't like, the penalties can be quite severe. Um, I also hold a Taiwanese passport. I have a British and an American passport too, but my Taiwanese passport means that I'm regarded as a Chinese national by the Chinese government. So I wanted to be extra careful. I didn't do anything that would make the government unhappy with me, because they did actually say that they felt what I was doing was promoting promiscuity.
Oh,
It just converged with this massive movement of young people from the countryside to the cities. And before that point in time, if you can believe it, every woman's menstrual cycle was monitored by a human every month so that no unwanted pregnancies occurred. And the Chinese actually eradicated all sexually transmitted diseases. This was one of the things that one of their big accomplishments, in addition to rolling out literacy among the population. They eradicated all sexually transmitted diseases. They had 80 million volunteers across the country monitoring women's menstrual cycles. Now, you can imagine with all these,
Extraordinary.
it was about 200 to 300 million young people moving to the cities as China modernized. That system broke down. These young people flooded the cities. They were no longer part of their village community. All of those it was usually an older grandmother who would monitor, be like the village monitor of menstrual cycles. And these women could no longer monitor the girls. So nobody knew what was happening. And so working with the Chinese government, I said, okay, look, why don't we give these people education? And I've got a platform that they want to come to. So let's educate them at the same time. And, we can put your safe sex information on my online matchmaking platform. But I'm going to tell you that if you really want people to read it, you can't just have safe sex there. You have to have good sex there too, or no one will be interested.
Yeah.
So, you have to have some honey for the bees.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I probably did one of the first, if not the first, internet collaborations with the Chinese government back in 1999.
That's extraordinary.
Um,
I mean, that's extraordinary because that's going to be something that, you know, it's probably one of the hardest countries to do something like that in, isn't it?
Back then it wasn't. They were very open to it. I think anybody who was in China at the time could see that they were open to new ideas. Things have obviously changed in the last decade and a half. But at that time, they really were, they were curious. And I found them actually very easy to work with. So that was my first brush with public health policy. And, we also did safe and good sex, love, and relationship advice in 180 characters and spaces over mobile phones. Because way back then, we could do text messages and you could subscribe to get these little sex, love, and relationship Q&As. And
Wow.
that
That's
was
incredible. So-
great fun.
Then what happened to the business? Did you sell it? What happened to that business in the end?
Well, so like everybody else, 2000 hit, April 2000, the internet boom hit bust. And by July of 2000, that had hit Asia. I think, closed my venture capital round in probably March of 2020. And I was very lucky because I had a lot of demand for that round. And I had written a kind of addendum contract to say that if in the future I needed more capital, I would take it at the same terms I had taken the rest of the round at. Because remember, I've sort of oversubscribed and was able to call on that capital to keep the company going.
Yeah.
By 2003, though, things had still not recovered. And I had continued to grow the database, but the people that I had in my database were primarily in India and in China. And those people didn't have credit cards, so they couldn't pay. And at the same time, my husband said, look, you're working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. When are we going to start a family? So I was over 30 at this point in time. And he was, understandably impatient. I had already done maybe 3 IUI, intrauterine inseminations at this point, just to try to help things along, help sperm meet egg, but that hadn't worked. And so, one day he said to me, what is the end game for this business? What are you going to do? When will you be content to walk away from it? And I said, I don't know. Maybe when I can sell it for $1 million. And he said, oh, is that what a baby is worth to you? And I thought, ooh, okay, I'm going to extricate myself from the business right now. And I literally, that day, I think I sent an email to one of the partners we had in Japan. and said, look, instead of us collaborating on a project, would you be interested in acquiring this? And it was just an all share deal. There was no cash. So it's not like I got rich from it. I had been working, without pay for some time at that point. So basically, it was just a straight share deal. And they took the software which we had developed. And remember, when you're using Asian characters like Chinese characters or Japanese characters, this is a whole different type of character to a Roman character. So the programming is really different.
Yeah.
And that was quite unique. So when the Japanese got a hold of it, they launched their version, their online matchmaking version in Japanese, and they said, hey, learn English. Here are all these people in India. You can learn English from them. It'll be like, talking to a friend, but you have to pay for them to be able to communicate.
Wow.
So the Japanese were paying, they had the credit cards, and within 2 weeks, that business went cash flow positive, which it had never been while I was doing it, because I was just trying to build the database, right? So that's what happened to that business.
And
I didn't get rich, but I got a lot of great stories out of it.
And how did you feel about your husband asking you that? Because some people today might say, gosh, that's an interesting conversation. Was it because on his terms or your terms? How do you see that?
I felt it was a fair question. He was several years younger than I was, but he was ready to start a family. And I think he felt I probably didn't give him a lot of attention because I was so focused on the business. I would literally start my day at 7 a.m. with some food at the desk, just in front of that screen until he came home at, say, 6 or 7 p.m. at night.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have moved.
Yeah.
All of this, of course, the stress, the sedentary lifestyle, the, poor diet, no contact with many others because I was too busy working.
Yeah.
All of this became the perfect storm and was the lead up to my illnesses later. So, I think I felt it was a fair question for him to ask.
And then, so when did you get this diagnosis?
Well, this was July 2003, and the SARS-CoV virus was already running rampant through Hong Kong. We didn't quite know exactly how it was transmitted. Everybody was wearing face masks. If I went on a bus, if a single person coughed, the whole bus turned to kind of glare at the person who coughed, even if they had a face mask on. It was a very tense time. My head of IT actually lived in one of the buildings where all of the COVID virus was spreading. So we were like wearing hazmat outfits and masks and, the whole gear, and then taking groceries and dropping them at the bottom of the building for him. It was a very surreal time. I remember seeing very patrician-looking British bankers in their pinstripe suits. They're golden, not golden. They're sort of silver locks, looking very, very elegant. And then this face mask, and I thought, that's so strange. Of course, it foreshadowed what we all went through in 2020. But in 2003. Hong Kong was not the place you wanted to be. And so my husband got a role in Colorado. We had complete culture shock because, Hong Kong it's a very densely populated area. And we got to Colorado, and I was very single-minded. We're here to have a baby. And Colorado happens to have one of the best, at that time, had one of the best IVF success rates in the country. And the Center for Disease Control actually publishes the success rates, the live birth rates of all the IVF clinics around the country. So it's very easy to get those stats. And when I went, I underwent the full battery of tests to find out what was possibly wrong with me. And we, we underwent 4 IVFs unsuccessfully.
It's a lot.
And they said, well, we know what's wrong with you. You have idiopathic infertility. And for anybody who doesn't know what
No, idiom.
idiopathic means, it's a fancy word. It's jargon, and it's a fancy word that means doctors have zero clue what's going on. But they describe it like that. Instead of saying, I have no idea,
Yeah.
which might, I think, make them look a bit dim, they say, oh, it's idiopathic infertility. And so when I turned 39, they said, now you have geriatric infertility because you're too old. So now we know what's really wrong with you. You're too old now. That's the explanation.
That
Never
was at
getting to the
39.
actual root cause. That was at 39. And they said, you have to, if you want to try to get pregnant, you're going to have to get donor eggs. And I mentioned I have a Taiwanese passport. That's because my mother is from Taiwan, so I'm biracial, and my father's was Caucasian. And I had a really difficult time finding a donor because there just weren't a lot. So I ended up finding a half Italian American, half South Korean girl who was already had 3 children, who was willing to donate her eggs to me. And going through this process, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is hard, but it's a challenge, but I've gotten through it. So now we've got the eggs. Now let's go through the IVF with hopefully very young eggs, and it's going to work this time, and it's going to result in a baby. And I think women who go through IVF, you get worn down pretty quickly emotionally, not to mention financially. All you want is a baby at the end. You want to
Yeah.
start being a mother and pour
Yeah.
your heart into some little human being. And around this time, I started to notice that I was getting really sharp pain when I tried to turn doorknobs or water faucets or use scissors, even typing emails. It was becoming excruciating. And I thought, this must be what arthritis feels like. I kind of remember my grandmother saying, oh, her hands hurt, and not really understanding it. And suddenly I'm faced with it. And I thought, okay, well, it feels like arthritis, but look, I'm only 39, so it's obviously not that. Better go to the doctor, find out what this is. And the doctor runs a battery of tests, calls me and says, please come into my office to discuss your results. It's the doctor herself calling, it's not the nurse. So I'm thinking, that's clearly not a good thing.
Alarm bells
Go
went
to
off.
see.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I had no idea what it was, and I had no understanding that this could be serious at all. It just seemed surreal to me.
Yeah.
So the doctor told me that I had rheumatoid arthritis, so I had been right. So she validated me there. That might not be the validation I wanted. And she said, so you just take these immune suppressing drugs. You just get them in the mail. They'll be shipped to you every month, and you keep them in the refrigerator and then inject them into your belly. My nurse is going to show you how to do it. Simples. And then she said, but your test results also show that you have lupus. This was completely new word to me. And I had no understanding of what it meant, but she explained that it looked as if my body was fighting cancer. I said, isn't that a great thing? Like, we want our bodies to be able to fight cancer. And she said, unfortunately, not in this case. In this case, your body is attacking your organs and tissues. And sadly, we don't have any management tools for it. So there's no cure, but there's nothing to stop it from doing damage. And I was really beginning to panic here. Wait a second. This is news to me. Doctors are meant to be able to fix things, right? This is like taking my car into the car mechanic's garage. You're supposed to fix things, and you have all the certificates framed on the wall behind you, and the white jacket and the stethoscope that indicate to me that you are a competent, capable person who should be able to fix me. So fix me. I'm paying you. I was in the United States, and I think that um, it's so different from the UK. But in the US, we pay out of pocket, sometimes with health insurance, but we feel very entitled as medical consumers. So this was a big illuminating moment to me when she pushed back and she said, I wouldn't do that round of IVF if I were you. Because I had said, look, I have a lot at stake here. I've got this IVF round with donor eggs. So hard to do, especially being biracial. Fix this now. And she said, I wouldn't do that round of IVF if I were you. Even if you're successful, you've only got a good 5 years left.
No.
And
So
that,
no.
yeah, that shuts you down as a patient. What's the comeback?
So how old were you at this stage?
39.
39, diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, your body was attacking yourself. You were told not to go through IVF, so you've gone through all the stress of IVF, and then you're told you've only got 5 years left?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness me.
So I left. I kind of wanted to run out of her office. I needed some space. I needed time to think because this was much worse news than I had ever anticipated. And as I left, I thought what Brene Brown always tells us to ask, is that really true? So I heard that, is that really true? And then I heard the voice of my much beloved, long deceased grandmother, a Midwestern American grandmother. These were pioneers. And I heard her say, let's throw the kitchen sink at it, Leslie.
I haven't heard that expression for a long time. It's like, yes, let's throw the kitchen sink at it. Oh my God.
Yeah. And so I thought, I'm going to do that because it only stands to reason that a patient who doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, gets good sleep, reduces stress, that they ought to do better than a patient who is smoking, drinking, sleep deprived, and stressed. So I just wanted to use common sense. And my goal was simply to be 1% better. I thought if I can just be 1% better, that is a win because I will be 1% closer to being the patient my doctor can find a cure for.
Yeah.
I thought if my doctor has better material to work with, then she might find a solution for me.
I think it's really important at this stage just to ask you, where did that mindset come from? Because in these situations when you're given information, like you were given information, like many people out there have been given terrible information, it's then what you do with it.
I think it was probably because I had already witnessed the medical system firsthand at that point. My grandmother, the same one whose voice I had heard, she had died of glioblastoma, a brain tumor. When I was probably 19, I had left UC Berkeley, so I left university for a year to go back to Indianapolis, Indiana, to the Midwest where she was, where I was born, to take care of her at home with my uncle. We had decided that, sending her to a nursing home or hospice care was like out of the question. They were basically parking lots for people waiting to die. That's what my uncle said. And he had worked for the Department for Health and Human Services in the state of Indiana, specifically looking at these convalescence homes. So we took care of her. She did everything, all the chemotherapy to really try to fight that tumor. And unfortunately, it didn't work. And I think it really robbed her of end-of-life quality of life.
Yeah.
And the tumor grew so much that she was not able to speak, to use her limbs. She essentially went into a coma. And, I was feeding her every day through a tube. I was turning her every 2 hours so she didn't get bed sores. I was reading to her. sometimes in the early days, she could squeeze my hand, but then as it got worse, she couldn't even do that. She couldn't even open her eyes. But I really felt her presence. Nevertheless, it was a horrible way to live those last few months. And I think that what was worse was when I went to her doctor, I said, look, we've been doing this for like months now. She did all the chemotherapy. She did all the things you told her to do. She's taking all the drugs. This isn't getting better. And he said to me, well, you can always stop feeding her. And that was because she had tubes through her nose that went to her stomach, and I was feeding her Ensure. I was pouring it into a funnel that would go to her stomach, chocolate, strawberry, Ensure. That's what she was getting. And I thought, how dare he put that on me?
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
her. Like,
Yes.
am I the one to actively take that step to kill her after she's done all of this? Like, it would have been better,
Yeah.
in my opinion, ethically, if maybe the cancer had run its course.
And she didn't do this horrific treatment and all this. Yeah.
Yes, the treatment was,
But I think we also
dare
have
I
to
say,
be
barbaric.
Yeah, I think we have to also be quite careful because obviously we're not making claims on this call this call.
No,
there are
not at
choices,
all.
but the answers when we come to these sort of situations where we think my father was a specialist in medicine, so when my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and there was no cure, it's like, what do you mean there's no cure? My father's a doctor. Of course there is. That's the hospital. We were growing up with that.
Yeah,
And it was like,
right.
she died within 1st of January, died 23rd of April. So gone at 68, whatever. So you were met with that. And so what did you then go and do? So you were diagnosed with all of this and told that you got 5 years left. What did you do?
I started reading and researching everything. I relied heavily on the chat rooms. So when you go through IVF, I had learned about these wonderful chat rooms full of other women trying to get pregnant, and you become friendly with them. You often will go through an IVF round with them, and you're all supporting each other, because it is, frankly, IVF is lonely. And who do you talk to, especially if all your friends have babies? It's just, it's devastating, really, to go through this. So I went from the IVF chat rooms to the rheumatoid arthritis and the lupus chat rooms. And on the lupus chat rooms, I was hearing about a new therapy that had been tested on 13 lupus patients in Germany. And every single one of these patients had gotten better. And this was contrary to what my doctor had told me. She had said, you should expect this to get worse over time. And I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. I need to get this therapy for myself. So I went to my doctor and said, look at this, this evidence out of Germany. And she said, well, 13 people isn't statistically significant. I can't prescribe this for you. So back to the patient chat rooms I went, and I found a doctor through other patients who was willing to prescribe it to me. He was based in San Francisco. So I went to see him, got this prescribed, got 2 rounds prescribed specifically to reset my immune system. So that is what they had discovered in Germany, was that the therapy, which is called intravenous immunoglobulin, it's a transfusion of antibodies from anywhere from 3 to 10,000 patients, meant for individuals who can't make their own antibodies, but it has immune modulatory effects. I thought, okay, I've got these 2 rounds set up to reset my immune system. I had better work hard to identify all the triggers to my immune system so that it stays calm, right? If we think of the immune system as a barking dog, okay, let's calm the dog down so it's not so easily riled in future. But let's make sure there are no sirens going by, no cats or squirrels running past. Let's identify what those triggers to the immune system are. And I used Dr. Barry Sears's book, The Anti-Aging Zone, which had come out in 2005. So now we're in 2005. Because in his book, he said that autoimmune patients are essentially patients who are prematurely aging due to inflammaging. So they have so much inflammation in their bodies that they are aging earlier than the rest of the population. And how you stop that is you introduce things that are anti-inflammatory, like extra virgin olive oil or omega-3 fatty acids, and foods that have them, like, say, sardines, anchovies, mackerel, salmon. But you also have got to remove the things that trigger that. And for me, I did an allergy test. It was gluten, dairy, eggs. But I also noticed that if I ate uh, foods that were very high in lectins, I mean, we tend to think all vegetables are good, but the nightshades were horrible for me. So aubergine, tomatoes, courgettes would swell my hands, especially tomatoes were a disaster for me. So I took all those things out. I started walking. I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and had the Rocky Mountains literally just maybe 4 blocks from me. I could go for a walk there. Started walking nearly every day. I started yoga. I did trauma therapy. I did the ACE test, which you can get freely online to see if you've had childhood trauma. I frankly looked under every rock if it resonated with me. And I
Yeah.
always say to patients, listen to what resonates with you. If you think doing something is going to benefit you, if you are comforted by holding crystals, then do that. If you are comforted by going to church, then you do that. If you are comforted by getting a massage, then do that. Because when we feel safe, that's when the body goes into parasympathetic mode and we can do the rest, repair, recovery that the body needs to do.
So I haven't heard that very often because people talk about, calming the body down. When you feel safe, that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, exactly. I think so much in our daily modern lives are there to stimulate us. We start with our morning coffee. We start with the morning news. The news isn't always great. Then we go into work. We have multiple ways that our bosses can get in touch with us, whether it's Slack, Trello, WhatsApp, text messages, email. Um, there are so many things that are there to put us on edge or keep us at a chronic state of arousal and therefore inflammation.
Yeah.
The body may be upregulating cortisol. If we are chronically exposed to cortisol, well, we will inflammage. And I think that, when running my online matchmaking company, as fun as it was, I'm sure that inflammaged me. That made sense to me. And so I did all of these things. I did the 2 rounds of intravenous immunoglobulin. I did have the immune suppressing drugs, but on the rheumatoid arthritis chat rooms, other patients who'd been on these drugs were saying to me, these drugs work for about 18 months and then they just stop. And your doctor is going to put you on another one and it's going to stop in 18 months. And this is going to be an unending merry-go-round. And the idea of suppressing the immune system, I got where they wanted to suppress it to stop damage to my fingers. So you can see my hands, anybody who's watching this, my hands don't have damage. They did get to it early, but I also was able to go into remission. And I thought, well, I get why you want to suppress the immune system initially, but can't we just bring the immune system back to balance? And again, the idea of intravenous immunoglobulin or IVIG, that resonated with me because it was modulating the immune system, turning the volume of the immune system down a little so it wasn't too loud, but it wasn't too quiet.
Yeah.
That's that Goldilocks zone that I think we should all strive for. So I stopped taking advice. I mean, I took advice and said, look, I really want to stop these immune suppressing injections. I hate them. And under advice, I stopped taking them as I finished my second round of IVIG. And I went in for a routine checkup with my doctor within 6 months of my initial diagnosis. And she opened her file and just said, well, look at that. You don't have lupus or RA. And I was like, what? And she said, all your labs have return to normal. And she was so blasé about it. And I just said, do you want to know what I did? That's amazing. And she didn't even look up at me. She just said, no, that's okay. You realize that the medical system it's a conveyor belt of patients, and we become commodities. And I'm not saying that doctors want this. I'm saying that especially in a system like the US where there is a lot of paperwork, right? For insurance claims, and you have a discrete window during which you are seen. And we see it in the UK too. Some doctors have only 6 or 8 minutes, and you can only talk about one thing, so you'll never get all the data points and enable the doctor to join them up into a holistic picture. The current system of sick care, whether in the US or in the UK, does not give doctors the opportunity to get curious about what is behind, what is the root cause of their patient's conditions, and does not give them the time to walk alongside their patients to help them unpick this. 100 years ago, when we lived in villages, your village doctor saw you probably walking in the US or the UK to church, knew your family, knew what your wife or what you were buying for food, knew what kind of hard work you were, if you were laboring in the fields or not, or if you were sedentary in a desk job. Our doctors today don't have this visibility. They don't have the whole picture. It's like that cartoon where you have 10 men blindfolded and they're touching a different part of the elephant and surmising what this animal could be, and they're all getting it wrong.
But I think it's really interesting because I think what surprises me on those situations, because again, every doctor's different, and it's not so much the individual, but it's the system. But it is, because surely if you'd been you and I sitting there, and someone said, I took my business from 100K to 1 million, you go, how on earth did you do that? Or
Right.
or you say, actually, I'm not on this drug, this weight loss drug. I've done it on my own, and I've lost 2 stone. Well, how did you do that? What did you do? And I also think that's another completely different subject. We'll come on to that. My views on that one. It's just because I think it takes away the work and the achievement by just taking a pill or doing it. It has the knock-on effect is so huge, I think, in those terms. But do you know what I mean? So it goes back to that curiosity of that doctor. What's taken that away from that individual? Because that's a shame, isn't it?
I think it's a systemic problem, and doctors don't. Many clinics in the U.S. employ a single person just to process all of the insurance paperwork. There's a lot, right? And then you obviously have, you have GDPR. Doctors, in order to stay profitable, they've got to pay for their liability insurance. And in a country like the United States, which is very litigious, that liability insurance is absolutely crucial to being able to practice, but it's expensive. And so there are so many things conspiring against doctors in this sick care system that the best they can do is they diagnose and prescribe. That is the well-trodden path, right? And of course, because I had been sent to a rheumatologist because I complained about pain in my hands, nobody had noticed that my thyroid had also been attacked and was gone. And that is because an endocrinologist would have needed to diagnose that. But classically, lupus and rheumatoid arthritis often come together with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So that didn't get diagnosed until a few years later. So it's this experience, this lived experience of having been through the system, both as a caregiver for my grandmother, but as a patient, that I realized that I had a lot more power than the system was giving me credit for. And in fact, conversely, I had been giving too much of my power away to the system, whether it was with my grandmother, just, okay, we'll do the full course. And, she was told there was nothing she needed to do about her diet or exercise or sleep. There was nothing she can do. The system certainly way back then with my grandmother, that would have been in the 1980s. Yeah, doctor knows best, and there's nothing that you, the patient, can do that could possibly help. This has changed and gotten better, I think. But
So you
even in
got to that point.
2004,
Boy, it was still
yeah,
so you got to that point. So you went to the doctor, had that, and then because there's one of the biggest things in your whole story with on the Instagram that was your biological age, and that's why I really want to because where you've taken the whole thing
yeah,
from as well, in
yeah,
terms of not just the 1%, it's what you've done on
yeah.
top of that. So keep going, keep going.
Well, so I'm in remission, and yes, I suppose that if we fast forward a few years, I do realize that there's still something not quite right, and go to the NHS doctor, say Dr. Google tells me it's my thyroid. Patients on chat rooms are telling me I'm being fobbed off. So see the NHS doctor, see the specialist on Harley Street, the specialist endocrinologist who say you're normal. Then go to a doctor that all the patients say is great, Dr. Barry Peatfield Durant, who sadly now passed away. He diagnoses me with hypothyroidism, tells me exactly how to treat myself, buying desiccated thyroid online. At the time, you could still do it. This is 2007, I guess. And warns me that if I'm not careful, because my hormones are now going to be in perfect balance, I'm going to get pregnant. So if I'm too tired and can't look after a child, I had better be careful. And I just, that was the biggest eye roll moment ever. Oh, please. I've spent over $100,000. I've visited specialist fertility doctors in Australia, Hong Kong, China, the US, the UK. This is not going to happen. And what do you know? 3 weeks later, pregnant. Then fast forward again. All I have done in the intervening years is focus on keeping inflammation down with just that same philosophy, diet, low stress, some movement. And I've now started another company and meet the folks at GlycanAge. GlycanAge is a biological age testing company that specifically looks at immune markers of biological age. And they basically said, look, we'll do it for you for free. This could be very interesting to see. You're an former autoimmune patient, but you've been in remission. Let's just check. So I was like, okay, I just come off of a red-eye flight from London to Orlando. I am sure it's going to be horrible, but go ahead. Here, take my blood. And the result comes back, and it shocks me. So it says 21. Now, what I will say is I think these tests still have a long way to go before they are really valid as true markers of your biological age, I think. Nevertheless, they show a trend. And
So they were
for
showing that
me,
your
as an
biological
autoimmune
age.
patient,
How old were you at that stage?
I was 59.
So, and you were told that you had a biological age of 21.
Yeah.
Did you feel that?
So, well, obviously, I wasn't, I'd already gone through menopause. I couldn't have a baby. So that's, that's one of the tests of, how old are you? I'm not, I wasn't capable of getting pregnant unless I was, sort of acting as the womb. But I was happy with the immune age. That was all that frankly matters to me because it said I was doing a good job with keeping the inflammation down. And so then I did, with about 6 months later, I did a C-reactive protein test. And I do high sensitivity CRP test pretty much every 6 months. And I thought, well, let's see if maybe my other inflammatory markers corroborate this. And that number was 0.3, which is frankly outstanding. So I thought, okay, well, these two are in agreement. I don't think I'm technically 21, but I think my immune system is in good nick. And I always say there are parts of the body you want to maintain like vintage cars. So let's just say that my immune system is a vintage car that has been kept. It's been taken care of very well. And, we have cells in our heart that don't replace themselves very frequently, too. We need to treat those like vintage cars as well. And so I was pretty pleased with it. Again, just because it invalidated what I had been doing. This approach of keeping my body in balance and keeping in that Goldilocks zone, right?
I love that. So what did you do? What was it?
What did I do?
What was your protocol?
It was essentially some movement, not too little. I wasn't out running marathons, but equally I wasn't just sitting on my sofa watching The Sopranos. Um, I was trying to hike. I was trying to do some mindfulness. I was doing healing visualizations. There was a fellow at Columbia University named Gerald Epstein who had a book called Healing Visualizations, and I sort of adapted his work to create a visualization for myself. Again, just trying to calm and tap into the parasympathetic. And then I also, was really, really careful on the food front, probably annoyingly so. And I do remember my husband, if we went out, I would say, "Do you have any gluten-free bread?" And they would say, of course, no. And then he would say, "I will have the gluten-full bread." So it was a time when it just wasn't done, and the same with alternative milks. I was making my own almond milk because they weren't offered, right?
Yeah.
We
used to
have
make it for
actually
our babies.
come quite
Yeah.
a long way.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
remember
so
making
we've
almonds for
come
our
a very long
babies.
way.
Yeah, because it wasn't all that. I mean, not and
Yeah,
I
and
think
you were
almond milk
doing
good.
it before me, Carolyn. You were doing it well before me.
Well, we were put in those situations. And my father was a specialist in medicine, but he also diagnosed chrome and nickel as carcinogens because he was working in the factories and saw the chemicals that were affecting them. So he was an occupational doctor, so he was looking at all that side within industry. But and I think that, and then obviously with you're throwing things, aren't you? It's a bit. I threw the kitchen sink at the situation I had with my daughter and did it, and it's extraordinary. So what was your diet then? What was your diet, and what's your diet now?
I was eating a lot of plants with a little bit of fish, and the plants were lectin free. So no tomatoes, none of the nightshades. Again, no courgette, no aubergine.
No
So that's
peppers.
eggplant, zucchini. Funnily enough, green peppers, I could feel that they were problematic, but red and yellow were not problematic. I couldn't tell you why. So you do have to experiment. Potatoes, not great for me, frankly. They also are a source of lectins. And gluten is the most famous lectin of all. So I was really good at avoiding that. I mostly went rice-based, like the ancestors on my maternal side. And today, my diet, I actually did a reel on my Instagram like yesterday, which was my absolute favorite snack is it's bean sprouts. So it's sprouts of different types like lentil sprouts, chickpea, mung bean, pea, um, sprouts, adzuki sprouts. And then I'll add in some edamame, put on a drizzle of high quality extra virgin olive oil, some Japanese seasoning, which is basically black and white sesame seeds, a little bit of seaweed, a little bit of plum leaves, and some salt. I'm getting like 10 different types of plant in that snack, and it takes me less than 60 seconds to make. But it is my go-to. That is my go-to. I love my overnight oats. So they're gluten-free oats. I'll add in some little pieces of carrot, little pieces of apple, cacao nibs, which are soaked in almond milk or coconut milk overnight. Tastes great the next day. I'll add some flaxseed, some cinnamon, little maple syrup if I want for taste, because that's half the glycemic index of table sugar. I'm not slavish about stay away from all sugar because we do like a little bit of sweet. But your taste buds will change, and you can use molasses, honey, and maple syrup really, as a swap, and they have a nutrient content to them. even honey has a little bit of this longevity compound studied at Oxford called spermidine.
Yes, so let's
So,
go on to spermidine and your company and your products, because I'm really fascinated by that.
oh, well, that, I'll also say that that beans are a great source of spermidine, and mushrooms are also a good source, but not every type. You want shiitake or oyster. Those are good sources. Fermented soy, a good source of spermidine. So, what is spermidine, this awkwardly named compound? Um, yes, I'll get it out of the way. It is in semen. It has multiple reasons for being there. One is because it allows the sperm to create an enzyme that breaks through the wall of the egg when it meets it.
Yeah.
But also, it's an antioxidant, because when men make sperm, it's a very highly oxidative event, and spermidine is an anti-inflammatory. It is also in all plants, and it is in super high quantities in breast milk. So when we women give our babies, when we breastfeed them, we are giving them plentiful amounts of it, as well as another polyamine. That just means it's a fancy word for made from amino acids, called spermine, which helps turn DNA, good genes on, bad genes off. This has been studied at the University of Oxford for its ability to reverse aging immune cells, reverse the dysfunction in aging immune cells. And we all know from having gone through COVID that one of the reasons why we needed group immunity, why the government was so hot on us getting this group immunity, was to protect older people and vulnerable young people, or people who had autoimmune conditions who couldn't fight it so well. Um, Actually, another way to achieve this is simply by giving those people with compromised immune systems, bringing function back to their dysfunctional immune cells. And the work done by Professor Katja Simon at the Kennedy Institute for Rheumatology at the University of Oxford, and Professor Ghada Al-Saleh, who's at the UK Space Innovation Lab, also at the University of Oxford, shows that you can get rid of these zombie immune cells by giving spermidine. And the spermidine doesn't tell the cells to necessarily undergo cell death, but it tries to save them, and it renews the cell. It takes all the worn out components and recycles them and turns them into a new cell, but it also takes the mitochondria, like the car battery in your cell. It gets rid of the old one and it puts a new one in its place. So you're getting effectively a new cell, but it still has the retained immune cell wisdom of having encountered many different variants of flu, virus throughout your life. So when they did an experiment in mice, they've done it in humans now too, but when they did this in mice initially, they tested it with the flu vaccine. And the UK spends a lot of money getting all people over age 60 into the GP surgery in the autumn to get their flu vaccine. And unfortunately, according to Katja, those flu vaccines actually don't work so well. So what she did was she said, okay, well, let's take some mice that are age matched to young people, mice age matched to older people, elderly people. Let's give them the flu vaccine. The antibodies go up initially in both. In old people, it plummets almost immediately thereafter, whereas in young people, it sustains. Now she gives spermidine plus the vaccine together. Now the antibodies go up, but actually they go up more in the elderly and they stay sustained. And that was crazy because it showed that older mice had the capacity to outperform younger mice if they had this. And the theory is that this is because they've been around the block a few more times, they've encountered more viruses and pathogens, and they have kind of a larger antibody cookbook of recipes that they know, oh, I've seen that before, let's go ahead and make this antibody, and they're faster. So when I saw that research, I thought, I think we need to get this out to more people. This is 2019. Before COVID was already a thing in China, but it wasn't here yet. And I then had to make the decision to launch during COVID. So in April,
Is
I
that
had
is
to
that
April
Oxford
2020.
Healthspan? Is that Healthspan you launched?
That's
Yeah.
Oxford Healthspan,
Yeah.
yes. And so I had to make the decision, should I actually launch this company and invest money? That was April 2020. And I said to Katja, I'm not sure if this is a good time. This is the immunologist at the University of Oxford. I'm not sure this is a good time to bring this product to market. And she said, Leslie, you have to. We don't have anything else. This could meaningfully help people.
Yeah.
And so, probably being the, stereotypical good girl, good student, I thought, well, the teacher says I should, so I will. And, I pressed play and we launched in June, and the rest is history.
My goodness me. So how many products is it? Is it just the spermidine? Is it just that one product that you do?
It's just the one, and we do it food derived because we don't have any safety or efficacy studies in humans with the synthetic. So there is synthetic, which you can get from China. You can use it in lab rats too, but only about 10% of all the rodent-related research is transformed or translated into human research. It's kind of, I think a lot of people don't realize that. So things can work in rodents that just fail in humans.
There's something very interesting that I've read about it as well. Is it can put you into autophagy, which is that right?
Yes, it activates. Yeah.
Fat burning.
So autophagy it's just Greek and it means self-eating. But what it really is more like I like to say self-cleaning.
Self-cleaning.
And it's like having a whole team of housekeepers come into your house daily to clean all your cells. And they're like Marie Kondo, looking for the things that no longer spark joy, putting them up into bags and sending them off to, Oxfam or wherever.
So a question I have, because obviously fasting is a big one, always trying to get autophagy. So that's the liver and the breakdown. So it's really understanding that. So people spend on many, many days fasting and weeks and months fasting. And I think the one thing that I've begun to really think very thoughtfully of more recently is what you're doing something that's a long-term strategy, or is it a short-term strategy? Because so often we're trying to get to a certain point, whatever it is in our lives, with intensity, but we can't maintain that. So it's like a high intensive exercise, or long hours working or eating. So can that help people break down? Because obviously a lot of people are on the weight loss drugs and things like that. Does this help clean the body? Does it help weight loss?
Weight loss is something that we haven't looked at with it. We do know that ours in particular has higher fiber than any of the other products on the market. That's both, we have a gluten-free version, which comes from a unique strain of chlorella that has a prebiotic fiber in it just naturally, and so does the wheat germ-derived one. But because we defat it, has a higher concentration of prebiotic fibers that will increase short-chain fatty acids in the gut that are positive for insulin, for instance. It helps with that, but I've never seen any studies showing it helps with weight loss. So I would never say this is a replacement for, say, the GLP-1s. I would also never say this is a replacement for body identical hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah. But longevity is the big thing for you, isn't it?
So everything starts at the cellular level. It's like, if you're going to be building a palace, which, my body is a temple, right? And if your body is a temple and you're going to build it, you want to have the best bricks possible. And those are the cells. So you want the cells to be in as good quality as you possibly can make them. And that is what autophagy does. Now, you mentioned fasting. You can fast, and fasting can activate the cell renewal process called autophagy as well. However, a study came out of Germany in 2024 that said that if you do not have the presence of spermidine in the body, you do not get the cell renewal benefits. You get the weight loss benefits of abstaining from food, but you do not get the cell renewal benefits. And I think that's important. people need to get, frankly, more plants into their diet, especially the ones I talked about earlier. And barring that, you can use, yes, you can use a supplement, but the safe ones are the food derived ones. And that is, that is really, really important that you do this in the long term, because while we produce it in our bodies naturally when we're young, as we get older, just like with testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, melatonin, all these things begin to decline. We need to top them up. And thankfully, we can get them from food.
Where is your work taking you now?
Well, I do a lot of work with something called the Oxford Longevity Project, which is an Oxford-based charity that really is looking to bring, we've been doing this since 2020, since COVID. It looks to bring the latest breakthrough science that people can use themselves, take advantage of now. Um, we try to shine a light on that. And before we started this call, we talked about the work of Dr. Louise Newson and how we had invited her to come to the University of Oxford, to Rhodes House, where we hold our conference, home of the Rhodes Scholars, because we really wanted to give her some oxygen. These ideas sometimes get crowded out, and there are going to be entrenched interests that are not happy to see these voices out there saying, actually, patients have a lot more power than they think, and they can take advantage of these things that will help them live longer, better. And I put body identical hormone replacement therapy into that category. So we've had Dr. Chris Van Tolken speak. We've had, so for anybody outside of the UK, he's a celebrity TV doctor, but who has also shone a light on how the tobacco industry basically took over the food industry to use the same tactics of addiction to get people addicted to food products. And now they're starting with, lots of ultra processed foods in children's foods, like Lunchables in the United States. This stuff is meant to addict, not to nourish. And so we talk about the exposome, how the environmental factors that we're subjected to, the postcode where you live, how all these things matter. And along with the basics of food, movement, sleep, a few years ago, we had Angela Rippon. She came and she spoke. She's an ambassador for Alzheimer's UK. Again, for those who don't know, the UK, she's a celebrity broadcaster, but at age 79 was on Strictly Come Dancing doing the splits, changing our perception of what it means to be 79. So that's what the Oxford Longevity Project does. And I think that as a patient, as a former caregiver, these things matter to me. Obviously, yes, I'm an entrepreneur too, but I can be multifaceted, right? I think all of us women are diamonds and we have many facets to us. So that's one of the other things that I do.
Well, I think it's extraordinary what you've done, and I want to ask you one sort of last question, but also, yeah, I think let's go there. So, what are the 3 things you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
I would say move, nourish, and renew. And so we know that movement is important. And I think that, these devices, laptops, Zoom calls, they conspire against us and turn us into sedentary beings, which we were never, ever meant to be. On the nourish side, that's not just nourishing in terms of, good food, good water, enough of both, not too much, not too little, but it's also nourishing with social relationships. It's nourishing with volunteering. I don't know if you know this, but there were studies 10 years ago that show that if you volunteer for 2 hours a week, 100 hours a year, you will live longer. Isn't
Wow,
that interesting?
so interesting.
Nourish with a sense of purpose,
So
ikigai, what the
interesting.
Japanese have,
Ikigai, I
right?
love that. Yeah, yeah.
Right? So there's a lot of nourishment. Nourishment also means good sleep. It means stress reduction techniques, if that's yoga, meditation, box breathing. All of those things are nourishment. And then renew. So what I mean by renewal is really that press that automatic oven cleaning button, autophagy, right? Get that renewal happening inside the body. Also, safety. Get yourself into that parasympathetic mode where you can rest, restore, renew. Because if you don't feel safe, if, say it's childhood trauma that keeps this lingering chronic inflammation in you, keeps you faster to respond or react to stress, that will lead to more inflammation. So, you need to focus on the renewal part. So those are my 3: move, nourish, and renew.
Oh, that's extraordinary. And honestly, it's been so lovely catching up with you. It was lovely to meet you as well at Dr. Newson's documentary launch as well. And we were talking about some of the old people like Patrick Holford and Leslie Kent and all those. That was raw food. My sister and I were talking about it the other day. And there's been some wonderful beacons out there, haven't there, in the future? And
Yeah.
If someone wants to know their biological age, just out of interest, how do they get that tested?
Well, you can get a glycanage test online. It's just glycanage.com. That's glycanage.com. And it is quite different from the methylation test. I've got to say, I've seen too much conflicting information on the validity of the DNA methylation test, even from Stephen Horvath, the sort of godfather of these biological aging tests himself, that I don't think they're quite ready for prime time. He says they're not ready for prime time himself. There's something called the Dunedin pace test, which gives you the pace at which you're aging. It's kind of like a speedometer. It tells you, are you like speeding, or are you within the right range? And I think that is a good one too. So Dunedin, like the city, Dunedin pace or glycanage are the 2 that I would test if you were curious.
And where can people find your website and your products?
Well, you can go to Oxford Healthspan, SPAN, like the span of a bridge.com. And if you want to, just see what I'm doing, like my little edamame bean sprout recipe, you can go to Leslie's New Prime, because I always say I'm 61. It's a prime number. I feel like I'm entering my new prime. And so it's LESLIE, then an S, New Prime. I wish I'd thought more about, the handle when I did it. And for the Oxford Longevity Project, that's on Instagram at Oxford Longevity Project. But you can go to the website, oxfordlongevityproject.org, and you can see all the videos from the past summits. And, we really just want to get the information out to people to really empower them and give them some agency, right? Everybody's got to learn. They talk about learned helplessness. We need some learned agency here so we can take back some of the power we might have given away
I think
unwittingly to our doctors.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how lovely it's been to have this conversation. I think also the other thing is to remind people, it's never too late. You can do it from today onwards. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't, the body is an incredible thing, or shouldn't call the body. If you've only got to give it the right things and to look after it, it can do wonders. And we don't make claims on here, but you can change things, can't you?
Yes, you can. You can even build muscle. There are videos online. You can even build muscle after the age of 100. I have seen it done. So it really is never too late. You have to start.
Can't wait. We must meet up very soon, but can't wait to share this with our listeners. Thank you so much for giving your time today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.